Welcome today to Music is the Ear Experience, collaborative instruction with music special collections. You're going to see a lot of saxophones today, which is a fair warning, that is a thing that we have here. I am Mandi Shepp. I am the coordinator of special collections and archives at Daniel Reed Library in SUNY Fredonia. We are a fun little campus in Western New York, and my co-presenter is...
Hi everyone, I'm Katelynn Telford. I am the interim music librarian at Daniel Reed Library, SUNY Fredonia.
And these are accurate visual representations of us during our working day. So a little bit of background about our institution and its collections. SUNY Fredonia began in 1826 as the Fredonia Academy. We are heading towards our bicentennial, so we are getting all of our fun school facts straight. That's the thing that we're focusing on. 1868, we converted to the Fredonia Normal School, one of 4 normal schools across New York State that focused on teacher training and education curriculums. Music instruction was incorporated into our curriculum in the early 1870s and has been a strong facet of Fredonia ever since. 1938, our music building was the first building created on our current campus location, which is like a half a mile from our old campus location. In 1942, we converted to a state teachers college that specialized in music education. And eventually in 1948, we joined as a part of the SUNY system that was newly created. And here we are. Reed Library has been a part of the campus since its inception. We've always had a campus library. Even as a normal school, the library became named the Daniel Reed Library with a campus expansion and construction in the 60s. We are housed in an IM Pay building, which is cool, but also weird to be in a brutalist building in a Victorian village, but that's another thing. We have a strong specialized music collection geared towards our extensive School of Music curriculum. Katelynn, if you'd like to talk a bit more about the music curriculum here, you totally could.
I'll just add that I'm an alumni. I attended the School of Music before getting my degree in library science. I think it's really great. And that's about all I have to say for now, but I may add some things later.
Fair enough. We focus on both performance and education, so it's a pretty wide-ranging special collection that covers a whole litany of topics. Our special collections and archives were formed in 1968 with the donation of the Stephens Zweig collection and grew into our current state of over 150 archival collections that focus on local and regional history, university history, and then unique signature collections alongside of our special collections books. So some of our notable music-related collections. The reason for all the saxophones in this presentation is the Sigurd M. Rascher papers. Rascher was a very prominent saxophonist throughout the 1930s through the 1970s. He's basically the reason that the saxophone is taken seriously as an instrument, as opposed to like a military band instrument or a novelty instrument. He kind of brought it into the forefront of classical music. So he's a thing. It's a pretty interesting collection. In addition to the saxophone interest, he was also involved in some occult beliefs. So it's kind of fascinating to see my two worlds merge like that. In addition to this, one of our other specialized collections, we have music-related papers in the Stephens Zweig collection. Zweig was a renowned Austrian author. He wrote a lot of novellas and biographies. And at one point, he was the librettist for Richard Strauss under the Third Reich. So very interesting to have a Jewish librettist in that situation. So we have a lot of correspondence between him and Strauss. We also have correspondence between him and notable female composer Alma Mahler-Werfel, as well as Arturo Toscanini and Carlotta Toscanini. So there's a lot of really cool, really specialized hands-on materials that students really, really enjoy working with. In addition to the very fancy collections, we also have some local ones that pertain to music. We have a faculty and alumni collection. We curate professional papers from our retiring faculty, as well as folks who just wish to have their papers donated here eventually. A lot of these are professional papers and compositions from notable people. We also have LPs that relate to our faculty performances. We've had a lot of folios and a lot of score manuscripts donated over the years. So it's a variety of instruments from like strings to vocals. There are a lot of moving parts involved in it and a lot of different specialties. So there's a little something for everyone in our music collections. We also have collections pertaining to local music festivals that were held by our normal school back in the day. At the turn of the century, they used to hold the Western New York Music Festival, which was basically a gathering of high school music classes and performers from all across like the 3-county area in Western New York. So they would come and have themed days like a vocal day, a percussion day, a choir day, woodwind day, things like that, where they could kind of hone their skills in a specialized group meant for that instrument. So we have some really cool like old panoramic photos that include like all of the cellists in Western New York. So it's kind of fun, things like that, and people really get a kick out of it. Finally, we also have one of our major music collections that's recently been digitized. The Historical Popular Sheet Music Collection includes folios for popular songs from the 1860s through the 1970s. So we have things like Civil War era type parlor music, through a hefty selection of vaudeville. And then one of our newer pieces is the sheet music for Dancing Queen from ABBA. So I am delighted with all of these new additions. So we've been working to digitize the things that are in public domain so that we can have so we can have a digital facet to also aid with like online instruction or high fluctuating modality type courses, stuff like that. So yes, I will turn it over to Katelynn now for talking about how we use these materials in our instruction.
Awesome. Thank you, Mandy. So to give you a bit of background on our roles as instructors at our library, typically on our own, my focus is more on non-archival research. So most of my classes go over like how to identify appropriate databases, identify search terms, much more like front-facing traditional, I guess the word would be. Mandi focuses obviously on her special collections and archives, how to do archival research, how to assess primary sources. So on our own, we have different objectives, but for a lot of our courses, we have an intersect of classes that would benefit from having both kinds of instruction. So in our slides today, we have a couple examples of some classes that we've worked on together, and I will kind of summarize our experiences with these classes. So starting on the ground floor, we have music appreciation for majors. When I was going here, the class that we would take instead was called Our World of Music, which basically every week we would have guest speakers come in and talk about like either careers in music or different things that you can focus on. And eventually it transitioned into this music appreciation class, and the instructor didn't really know what to do with the curriculum. So she had reached out to me and said, like, I'd really like to get them in the library. These are the incoming freshman students. I'd like them to know what the library can offer for them. So this was immediately a natural fit for both of us, where I kind of took the lead for the circulating music collections and show them what they can loan out or access through our databases. And as you have seen, we have a ton of archival music collections that Mandi can help expose the students to from like their first semester on campus. A lot of times when I'm helping students, I always get I wish I knew about this sooner. So this is a great way for us to make sure that students know what we have. One of the challenges we faced with this class is its size. So when we taught it last year, we had about 60 students. This upcoming semester, there's going to be 75. So we had to figure out in a reading room that can fit like 25 people how we were going to run this class. So the solution we came up with was to break the students into 3 different groups and rotate them through modules throughout the course of a week. So for example, we did it alphabetically by name. It doesn't really matter, but the students were assigned to a group. Day one, I would take one of the groups up and give them an instruction session on the music collection. So navigating the collection using call numbers, basic information about how many things they can loan out and how long the loan period is. Another group would meet with Mandi in archives, and they would do an activity that Mandi's going to explain in a few slides just to get them familiar with what we have in the library. And then the third group, we curated some asynchronous tutorials for them to kind of get them used to the online searching, so navigating our databases, placing interlibrary loan requests. So all three of those together gave them a really comprehensive view of what the library has to offer. And then the next class, they would rotate. So the group that was with me would go with Mandi. The group that was with Mandi would do the asynchronous sessions, and then the sessions would come to me, etc. So through the course of 3 class periods within the same week, we were able to work with all of the students. Now, this was a really successful class. One of my favorite takeaways from this was we overheard a student afterwards calling who we assume was one of their parents, and they were like, "Oh my God, the archives is the bomb." So they were genuinely excited about being there and seeing what we hold. I'm super excited because we don't usually get to work with this many freshman students. A lot of the classes that we do are like middle of the road, like sophomore, junior, and seniors. So this was a great way to introduce them to our library. Mandi, anything to add for this one?
No, I think you pretty much covered it. Yeah, it's a fun class that we get to use a lot of like a bigger variety of materials because they don't really have so much of an academic focus as freshmen. So it really gives us a chance to break out some of the weird stuff that they might not have seen before and might not fit into other lessons. So I like it for that purpose. It's a nice wild card.
Mm-hmm. All right, then I am ready for the next one. So going to the other end of the spectrum, we have our music bibliography graduate course. Whereas the music appreciation was just kind of dipping their toes into kind of everything that we have, music bibliography was much more specific. This was a very rewarding class to do because as a student going here, I can confirm that our music bibliography class wasn't as geared as much towards research. And I feel like I didn't really get much out of it when I took the class. When one of our faculty members took over the class, they recognized that they needed to kind of update their curriculum and the syllabus. So we met the 3 of us and kind of went over what should students know how to do in regards to research. One of the things that a lot of instructors have noted is that students' research skills are not as high as they're expecting them to be. So they'll come into this graduate level class and they may not know things that the instructor assumes that they do. So this was a great chance to kind of check in with these students and see where they're at with being able to locate and synthesize information. We did something similar to the music appreciation class, except this was an all-in-one session. So our graduate classes are 2.5 hours long, and neither of us can really fill all of that time. So we decided to divide and conquer. So for the first half of that section, I met with the students in our music collection, and we took a really deep dive into bibliographic concepts. So I introduced them a review of how to break down call numbers, how to locate subject headings that may be helpful to find other resources. We talked a bit about genre form terms and access points. And then after we took a look at applying these to the circulating collection, we took a trip down to the archives and Mandi led her session on how to conduct research with archival materials and primary sources. As I touched on, this was much more meaningful to the students. The instructor told us that several of the students had restated how helpful they found this portion, which again was really rewarding for me because we knew what we were doing was impactful for the students' research project. Since then, the instructor has made sure to incorporate us into the syllabus. So we are every time this course is offered in the fall semester, we have been and will be working with them. This is another one that we just got a request for, so we'll be doing it again. And an exciting thing for the archives, the students were so excited to be working down there that Mandi saw an increase in research appointments from students. So they're making an effort to come back outside of their class time, which is like the biggest thrill.
For sure. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about how I conduct my learning activities. So because these are introductory kind of sessions, a lot of these students have never been in an archives before. It's new stuff to them. And they know how to research with like an article or a book, but not really with like a thing. And some of that is kind of what you need to do. If you're a woodwind player, you need to know how to research with like the instrument as an object. We also have the fun situation of having a lot of materials that are in German language without having a German department. So they're not actively learning the German, but we have all of these materials. So one of the ways that I kind of like to breach the language barrier is to just kind of have them look at these things as objects, as opposed to let's try and bust out Google Translate and try and get into the weeds with that. It's more of what does this object say as opposed to what does it contain. So that's kind of how I approach a lot of this. So I do what I call 3-2-1 archives. So I start with a little introductory spiel about proper handling, use of materials. We generally take a class trip to the restrooms to go wash our hands. Depending on the materials, I have gloves available, but for the most part, I try and just use clean hands. So I divide students into small groups as appropriate. Sometimes I get very, very small classes, but usually the music classes are a bit bigger that these small groups and stuff are beneficial. So I have a series of materials laid out before me. I kind of say, you know, move near something that interests you. And I give them about 5 or 10 minutes to kind of collaboratively explore these materials in small groups. Sometimes up to 15 if they're really, really into it, or there is actually a lot of interest that's, you know, noticeable and tangible, which is the goal, I guess. So after that, for 3, I have them share 3 things that they learned from their object, like, you know, even just basic observations or insights that they have, how this object connects to something that they already know. So just sort of a nice field test of what do you get out of this? How do you enjoy this sort of thing? And then for 3-2-2, I go for an analysis portion where the groups are asked to kind of share 2 research ideas that could stem from the items that they explored and how these items or their themes connect to broader research themes. So what sort of arguments could you make using this object as a material item? And then for 1, I have them do a reflection. I ask them to kind of reflect on their experience of exploring as this object and exploring the idea of researching with objects. And kind of share one thing that they enjoyed. I split this up into undergraduate versus graduate. I'm not going to expect the same degree of insight out of freshmen that I would out of graduate students, especially since they are just starting on their academic journeys as opposed to someone who's been in it for 4 or 5 years. So for reflection, I asked one thing that they enjoyed if they're undergraduates or one item that they would like to use in their further research if they're graduates. To kind of get an idea of this is for you. This is here for you to research with. Otherwise, why are we hanging on to this stuff? So if we would like to take, I think we're at an appropriate time. I can give you a little live example of this activity if we feel like being active chat people. I'm going to pause this for a moment. Oh no, my saxophones. I am going to unshare so you can see me. Oh God, how do I unshare? Stop share. There we go. Sorry. Hi. So I have an object here with me, and I'm going to Vanna White this. And I would like to see in the chat, we'll make this simpler than 3, 2, 1. What sort of observations can you make about this device? It's totally not going to take 5 or 10 minutes. Anybody? Correct! No keys! So this is a keyless saxophone. It is an alto saxophone. You are correct. It does not have keys. It does not have the stuff. That is definitely correct. And it is indeed metallic and shiny. All of these observations are completely valid. Good job. So Katelynn can tell us a little bit more about how this thing actually works.
Yeah. So the keyless saxophone is a really interesting specimen because it is designed to be played with the overtone system. So if any of you have ever played a brass instrument, you know that if you change the shape of your mouth, you can change the pitch that comes out of the instrument, so higher or lower. So this is designed to help students practice their overtones. You can do overtones on a woodwind instrument. And if you're playing a saxophone that doesn't have any keys, you have no choice. So I studied saxophone here as a student, and our professor would borrow the keyless saxophone from the archives, like as a teaching tool. So it really helped us to focus and change our embouchure to adjust the tone. It's neat. There's not a ton of them. I don't think they make them anymore. And this is something that whether you're a music student or not gets people really excited because like I know what a saxophone looks like and this isn't it. So it's a great conversation starter. And fun to kind of give that background on it as well.
Oh yeah. And it definitely gets people to think about how this object can connect to broader things like saxophone performance or woodwind performance, or how you form your mouth, your embouchure and stuff like that. And most folks enjoy this thing because they've never seen anything like it before. So thank you. Thank you for participating in our little 3, 2, 1. And back to our regularly scheduled slides.
Well, Mandy's getting that set up. Oh, that was fast. I was just gonna mention the tour that we just gave for the students visiting from Japan. And we gave them a tour of the whole library and they were very polite, but not exactly engaged. And after the library tour, we brought them down to the archives and Mandy had pulled a few things for them. And I think it happened that the professor who had borrowed the keyless sax was returning it. And all of a sudden they were so interested. They're like, that's a saxophone, isn't it? Like they were so thrilled. So I love universal examples like that where like doesn't really matter where you're coming from, it's just cool. Like no matter what your experiences are.
Oh yeah. So I wanted to show a few photos of example classes that we've done and like how we've kind of set up our room. So this is my, if you were in the last session, this is my perfectly circular reading room. We talked about it a little bit in the instruction spaces session. So this is our entire collection of saxophones from the Rasher collection. I like to lay these out and have students explore them. We have some specialized students, but even the intro music students like to see, it's basically one of every flavor of saxophone, from like the sopranino. We even have a weird, like rare E flat alto saxophone that I do not understand because I played the trombone in high school. To the keyless that I just showed. We also have a straight saxophone without any bends in it. So there's a lot of really quirky examples that kind of display the variety that one instrument can have, and that really like affects folks and they find it interesting, which I am delighted by. So next, this is how I set things up more typically for a 3, 2, 1 activity. Some of this is music. This was a setup for a different a different kind of freshman class. But I like to have everything. I try and keep like materials like the freshman beanies and the marching cap back here. I have some documentation. I have handwritten documents. I have typewritten documents. I have uh, like photographic and like more visual centered materials as well as books. I like to keep everything with the boxes that they are usually housed in so that folks can kind of get a better idea of how that system works and like what it means when things actually like live in the archives. So it kind of helps get students to wrap their head around like you can't just see this stuff at any moment of any day. There is a process to getting the thing out of the box and bringing it to the room. So that does really help to kind of communicate that process, even if not super overtly. Back to you, Caitlin.
Yes, I am back to tell you about more classes. So these last two that we have kind of shift more from like traditional instruction to more community projects. This one's a little bit of both. So because of the Sigurd Asher collection, we have a really strong relationship with the saxophone studio here on campus. The instructor is super interested in making sure students are aware of what we have in the archives. So typically once a semester, we will work with him and the studio to kind of get them introduced to the Rasher collection. The same instructor also works with our summer music festival students. So we also work with high school students or prospective students that are playing the saxophone. So because both of these settings are more performance-based rather than research, we follow more of the petting zoo approach that Mandi had mentioned earlier, where we lay out materials from these collections, a lot of the instruments that you saw in the previous pictures, but also some of the text and other documents from the Rasher collection. So in this setting, we will have them kind of pair up, pick something that interests them, and really just encourage them to ask questions. Typically, Mandi and I do these together, so if they have an archival question, they can ask Mandi. If they have a more technical question related to the instruments, they will ask me. And then we also want to encourage them, as Mandi said, here's how you make an appointment if you're interested in working with these on your own time. Mandi is great about keeping these materials accessible, so we will also let people come in and play test the instruments. So if you bring your own mouthpiece and reeds, as long as you make an appointment, that's fine with us. We'll have everything ready for you. These ones are super fun to watch because the students are so into it. They get so excited when they see the instruments in front of them. The last group we did was one of the music festival groups, and everybody's like, oh my God, can you take my picture with this? So everybody got pictures with all the different instruments. They're holding them, they're moving the keys in their hands unless they're holding the key list. And another trend with these kind of classes is students completely forget about like class time. So they're here as long as they can be. We have a lot of the students, they stay pretty late, like 15-20 minutes past their class time. And if you've ever taught a class, you know they would not be doing that unless they were really engaged with the materials. So again, one of my favorite classes to do. It's nice to see the students get so into it. And this is another one where we've had students come back on their own time after making an appointment to continue looking at these materials. And Mandi, if you don't have anything to add, I think that's it for this one.
I would just like to add and echo again for the millionth time that I'm so grateful that you come to these saxophone classes because they ask very technical questions that I have no hope of knowing.
Yeah, the questions that these kids ask are very specific. Like, I do not remember thinking about these kind of things when I was in high school, but I'm glad that they are engaged with the materials, and we do the best we can.
It's terrifying.
It is. So the last kind of case study we have for you today relates to the New York State School Music Association. If you're not familiar with NYSMA, it is an organization for K-12 music teachers within like public school districts. If you played an instrument or sang in high school and you ever went to one of those events where you like performed for a judge and they gave you a grade, If you were in New York State, that was probably for NYSSMA. So because of our renowned music school, we have a really nice collaboration with NYSSMA wherein they come to our campus every fall and they hold their all-state festival there. I was definitely a NYSSMA kid and I still have close ties with a lot of the members of the group. So this past fall, we reached out to them and said like, hey, we'd like to hold some sort of programming for the music educators while they're here. When their kids are in rehearsals, they don't necessarily need to be present. So we wanted to give them an opportunity to explore the library and remind them that you don't have to be a student or faculty on campus to use these materials. We have a community borrower program, so circulating materials in my collection, they're open to everybody. And in archives, as long as you make an appointment, those are accessible as well. So what we did for this group was ahead of time, we sent out some sign-up sheets for tour slots. We did like 3 or 4 hour long tour sessions. And as they came in those sessions, we gave them a general tour of the music collection, again, reminding them that this is all loanable to them as well. We also gave them a chance to register for a community borrower card. If you know any K-12 teachers, you know that they are incredibly busy during the day, so this may be something that they wouldn't be able to do otherwise, like come in and sign up for a card. And then we concluded our tours in special collections where, again, Mandi had some cool materials pulled. For this one, we focused a lot on music in Western New York because these are all local teachers. I forget exactly what the territory is, but Zone 1 is Chautauqua County and maybe part of another county. But either way, most of these teachers are familiar with Fredonia and the impact that it has on the music community. So starting out, last year was our first time collaborating with NYSSMA. We had several small groups of participants take these tours with us. Everybody who came was just thrilled and happy to know that we had these kind of materials. We also had some people express interest in bringing their classes at some point. We have not had any of those yet, but this festival will be coming up again in November. So we would like to try to get even more people to attend this year.
Awesome. So what I do for a lot of these tours and such like that, I try and have the option for petting zoos and open houses. I also have a few classes that are just strictly in a petting zoo open house format of just, they want to look at stuff. Like we have a book arts class that comes in and they just want to look at weird bindings, and I'm cool with that. So that's sort of what we do. It's a bit more casual and a bit more visual and material based, which is kind of nice. It lets the artifacts speak for themselves, and I can kind of answer questions about them as specific items. So I usually begin these with a brief introduction to our archival collections, like a tiny tour of our circular reading room, and giving some basic handling procedures, encouraging them to go wash their hands. If it's a class, we make a trip to the restrooms again. I give an explanatory tour of the items that are on display. So it's sort of a reverse of the 3-2-1 activity. 3-2-1, I start by just telling them handling procedures and absolutely nothing about the items. I give them a tour of what they are actually seeing after we're done with our discussion portions, and after the activity is concluded, then I kind of go, all right, here's what it is. And that's usually pretty fun because I want to see what their ideas are and what sort of things that they are getting out of this activity. So I give them their explanatory tour. I give them about 15-20 minutes for hands-on exploration so that they can encounter these materials and see what they want to see. And then I do Q&A during exploration and afterwards with the teaching faculty, or if it's Katelynn and a teaching faculty, all three of us will do a Q&A so we can kind of get people's interests where they need to be. And, you know, some people get very specific, like with the saxophone students, they get extremely granular. And then some people just get interested in other things in the room that I did not select for display. So, hey, that's fine. That's a different opportunity to engage them, and we're going to use that. So this is a photo from one of the recent class visits that we had. We had a group of high school students come from Japan. So we had they were learning about early printed media, and early American imprints. So we have some very early music books that we could pull and kind of show them as sort of a universal language type of deal. Um, and then we had some other objects that were involved in this as well. Everybody really seemed to enjoy it. They were engaged. They had been to a museum the day before. So they were really blown away that they could like touch the history and not just look at it behind a glass case. So I really find that experience to be important. And then this is another bespoke tour. This is the Rasher Saxophone Quartet. They are the lineage, legacy, whatever, of Sigurd Rasher. He started this quartet in the 60s with his daughter, and then it still carries on in his name to this day. So they came in, did a performance in a master class on our campus a few years ago, and then I was able to give them a private tour. I pulled things from the Rasher collection and from the quartet collection just for them. Some of it was funny because a few of them were in the artifacts. So they got a kick out of that and the whole, memory lane experience. So it was very rewarding and very fun. And yeah, overall, I think this whole process is very unique. It's a very fun way to kind of think about material objects and material culture in a different way.